In a sweeping and unprecedented move, the Russian government has seized assets worth a staggering $50 billion, targeting not only powerful oligarchs, but also major foreign companies operating within Russia's borders. This is a calculated and bold strategy by President Putin designed to reassert state control over Russia's vast wealth and economic power, while sending a clear message to both domestic and international audiences. The ongoing war in Ukraine has put immense pressure on Russia's finances, and the Kremlin is now using these high-profile takeovers to fund its military operations and try to stabilize a turbulent economy. Factories, banks, energy firms, and real estate, once the proud symbols of Russian capitalism and private success, are now being brought firmly under state control, changing the face of the nation's economy. The message to Russia's business elite is unmistakable. Loyalty to the state is now non-negotiable, and the era of untouchable private fortunes is coming to an end. The era of freewheeling capitalism, which defined post-Soviet Russia for decades, is over. The state's interests and priorities now come first, above all else. Putin is building what he calls a fortress Russia, using confiscated assets to withstand external economic pressure, reinforce national security, and fund his long-term ambitions for the country. This marks a dramatic and historic shift. The state, not private business, is now the ultimate authority and driving force in Russia's economy. But this new foundation, built on seized private enterprise and forced loyalty, may prove unstable and unpredictable in the years ahead, raising questions about Russia's future. Russia's economy is under siege, facing one of its most challenging periods in recent history. It is battered by the soaring costs of war and the relentless pressure of crippling Western sanctions, which have only intensified as the conflict drags on. The war in Ukraine has forced the Kremlin to pour vast sums into the military, draining resources from other vital sectors like healthcare, education, and infrastructure. Sanctions have cut Russia off from global finance, weakened the ruble, and driven up inflation, making everyday goods more expensive and hurting ordinary citizens across the country. Over 1,000 Western companies have fled, taking capital, technology, and jobs with them, leaving the economy stagnant and innovation stifled as opportunities dry up. Foreign investment has dried up almost overnight, and Russia is left to rely on its own strained resources, struggling to keep industries afloat and workers employed. For many Russian families, the economic pain is personal. Household budgets are stretched thin, and uncertainty about the future is growing. With war costs rising and sanctions biting deeper, the government needed a new source of cash, fast, to keep the state running and maintain public order. The fortunes of oligarchs and abandoned foreign assets became irresistible targets, offering a quick way to raise funds and send a message to the elite. Seizing these assets was both a desperate move to plug budget holes and a way to keep the war machine running as the government tightened its grip on the economy. The mounting economic storm gave the Kremlin both motive and cover for its dramatic power grab, reshaping Russia's future in ways that are still unfolding. The Kremlin didn't just grab assets by force, it built a legal framework to justify the seizures. New laws and decrees gave the state sweeping powers to confiscate property, all under the guise of national security and economic stability. The government claimed it was correcting past injustices from the chaotic 1990s privatizations or protecting strategic industries for the war effort. Disloyal oligarchs and foreign firms leaving Russia were easy targets, accused of mismanagement or abandoning their responsibilities. The message private ownership is a privilege, not a right, and can be revoked at any time. Courts and security services enforced the takeovers, giving the process a veneer of legality. Critics say these laws are tools for political and economic control, punishing dissent and consolidating Kremlin power. By institutionalizing the seizures, the government minimized opposition and deflected international criticism. The legal maneuvering turned a political purge into a matter of state policy. The Kremlin's crackdown has hit Russia's most powerful oligarchs and major international corporations. Tycoons like Oleg Deripaska and Mikhail Fridman have seen their empires threatened or dismantled, signaling that no one is untouchable. The state's focus is on strategic assets, energy, banking, and natural resources, especially those vital for war funding. Foreign companies, from Carlsberg to Danone, have had their Russian operations seized or placed under state management as they tried to exit. These takeovers serve two purposes: securing revenue for the state and retaliating against Western sanctions. The Kremlin is sending a message: Russia will hit back, and international business norms no longer apply. The new policy: the state's interests override all private property rights, domestic or foreign. The era of untouchable oligarchs and foreign investors in Russia is over. The asset seizures were executed with speed and force, leaving little room for resistance. Security services like the FSB raided company offices and oligarchs' homes, gathering evidence and freezing bank accounts. Legal cases followed swiftly, citing new laws on national security or illegal privatization. Some oligarchs faced house arrest or criminal charges, making defense nearly impossible. Once courts ruled in the state's favor, ownership was transferred to government entities. For foreign firms, presidential decrees stripped them of control overnight, often without compensation. The process was systematic: raids, arrests, frozen assets, and court orders ensured efficient takeovers. The Kremlin controlled the narrative, framing the seizures as anti-corruption and national defense. For those targeted, it was a shocking loss. Their empires dismantled piece by piece. The methods showed the Kremlin's absolute power. Legal and financial defenses were no match for political will. The Kremlin's asset grab delivered a quick financial boost, funding the war and stabilizing the budget. State control of profitable companies provided immediate revenue and projected strength amid economic turmoil. The government framed the move as patriotic, reclaiming wealth from disloyal oligarchs and hostile foreigners. But the long-term costs are steep. Investor confidence has collapsed, and business leaders fear they could be next. Capital flight is accelerating as the wealthy move money abroad, draining the economy further. Russia risks sliding back toward a Soviet-style command economy, inefficient, uncompetitive, and resistant to innovation. The stock market has plunged, and analysts warn of stagnation and increased repression. The short-term cash injection may have solved an immediate crisis, but it threatens Russia's future economic health. The price of state control could be decades of lost growth and opportunity. The world has condemned Russia's asset seizures as illegal and dangerous. Western governments and business groups warn that these moves will deepen Russia's isolation and deter all future investment. New sanctions are threatened, aiming to further restrict Russia's access to revenue and technology. The message to global business assets in Russia are at risk of being seized without warning or compensation. The Kremlin defends its actions as a necessary response to Western economic warfare. Putin frames the policy as building a self-reliant fortress Russia, free from Western influence. This standoff has widened the rift between Russia and the West, with each side digging in. The Kremlin claims Western firms' exit creates opportunities for domestic businesses, but the risks are clear. As Russia turns inward, many fear it marks a permanent break from the global economic order. At the core of this upheaval is Putin's vision for a fortress economy, self-sufficient, state-driven, and insulated from the West. This approach is not just about economic survival, but about asserting Russia's sovereignty and independence in a world that Putin sees as increasingly hostile. The Kremlin's strategy is to build barriers against foreign influence, ensuring that Russia can weather sanctions and external shocks without relying on Western markets or technology. The Kremlin now demands not just loyalty but active support from the business elite, especially for the war effort. Business leaders are expected to align their interests with the state's priorities, channeling resources and expertise into projects that strengthen Russia's military and economic resilience. Oligarchs who resist face asset seizures, legal battles, or exile, caught between a hostile West and a demanding Kremlin. Many have seen their fortunes dwindle, their influence curtailed, and their options for escape rapidly disappear as the state tightens its grip. Most legal challenges have failed, showing the state's power is absolute and dissent is futile. The message is clear: opposition will be crushed, and the rule of law is whatever the Kremlin decides it to be. Putin is betting that centralizing control will sustain Russia through a long confrontation with the West. By consolidating power, he hopes to create a unified front capable of enduring economic hardship and military pressure. This shift moves Russia away from post-Soviet market reforms towards state capitalism focused on military and security needs. Factories are being repurposed and resources redirected to support the war machine, echoing the Soviet era's emphasis on heavy industry and defense. The long-term success of this model is uncertain. It may bring short-term stability, but risks stifling innovation and prosperity. Critics warn that isolation could lead to stagnation, brain drain, and a decline in living standards for ordinary Russians. The fate of Russia's economy now hinges on whether a fortress can truly thrive in isolation. Can a nation cut off from global trade and investment still compete and grow, or will it be left behind? The $50 billion power play is reshaping Russia's future for better or worse. Massive investments are being funneled into strategic sectors, but the risks are as great as the potential rewards. The world is watching to see if this gamble will pay off or lead to lasting decline. As Russia doubles down on its fortress strategy, the outcome will reverberate far beyond its borders, shaping the global order for years to come.